Hey, welcome everyone. Today it's a intimate group because there's no one on the Zoom. I only have this, first of all, to show you the slides, but mainly to record it for those that want to hear it later. So it's just us in the room. And it's not only half, it's majority women. Yeah. So I'm very happy, considering the topic that we have at least a fair representation of women. So yeah.
Last week it was fabulous to watch on YouTube.
Yeah.
You can stop, watch it whenever you want. Brilliant.
Yeah, was it okay, the quality?
Very good.
Oh, good. I'm happy to.
And the other people, you need to.
You can't hear so much, right?
You can hear all of them if you raise the volume.
Right. So something that I was thinking about that because someone was watching on Zoom and they were saying they can't hear when people in the room are reading. So I was thinking to get like a microphone to pass around. So high tech, maybe it'll be on the wish list. So today's topic, as Isabel rightfully mentioned, is connected to the Parsha from yesterday. We speak about the secret strength of the Jewish woman. Now, in Jewish history, women have always been at the very heart of Jewish continuity. And if you go through many stories, think about the story of Purim, you've got Queen Esther, story of Hanukkah, you have Judith, who was very, very courageous. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story about how she, when she was the general, basically abducted her to sleep with him, and she fed him cheese, and she fed him wine and cheese, so he got thirsty and drunk. Then he fell asleep, and then he chopped off her head, and she ran out. So the Jewish women were very courageous throughout history and played a very central and pivotal role in every stage of Jewish history.
Like in sad story.
Yes, a little bit. So we'll start with the elephant in the room. There is, I say, a myth, or that some people say that you read the Torah or the Jewish ideas that women have some sort of like second class. Would you say there's such a myth or such an idea?
Yes, I think because of the sitting apart, it's as if,
So like in the synagogue, for example, right? So
and the perception of in Orthodox circles of the women having to do things differently.
Right. So there are certain commandments, mitzvot, that women are not obligated to do, like tefillin. Women don't do the tefillin, talis, and tefillin. They don't, they don't count for the minyan. So that can really seem offensive to many. And we were actually going to touch upon that as well in this class at the end to explain the deeper reason why women are not obligated in certain commandments that men are.
So if they're not obligated, but could they?
So some yes, and some the custom is not. So some commandments, so the general rule is all commandments that are time bound. So positive commandments that are time bound, women are exempt from. So think about the commandment of love your fellow as yourself. That's not time bound. That's something that's applicable all the time. But then you think about the mitzvah of saying the Shema. It says once in the morning, once in the evening, or putting on tefillin. It's only in the daytime, not in the nighttime. Or there's the commandments that have to do with the holidays, like shaking the lulav and a etrog is time bound. It's only on Sukkot. So the negative commandments that are time bound, like don't eat chametz on Passover, so negative commandments are always obligated, but the ones that are proactive, that are positive, do this, do that, go to synagogue, pray 3 times a day, all those kinds of things, the things that sort of keep men busy, you have to go do this, you have to go do that. Women are exempt, and we're gonna speak about once we learn the whole class, we'll have a bit of more clarity as to why that is, and that also answers the question about the synagogue and the reason why, why all of that. Okay, so to open up. We're going to actually we're going to highlight several famous women throughout the Torah and throughout Jewish history, and we're going to learn their story and the lesson that we learned from them. But we begin with the story from this week's Parsha, which is the story of the daughters of Tzlafchad. So this is sort of at the end of the 40 years when the Jewish people were in the desert, and they were preparing to enter the land. And it's very fascinating how there's a whole system, how they were going to portion the land of Israel. They divided it into 12 portions for the 12 tribes, and each tribe would get one portion of the land. And there was a whole system how they did lotteries, where each the head of each tribe picked out a lottery, and they saw which portion they would get. But the way it worked was that each family, each household got a specific plot of land for them to get when they go into Israel. And the way it worked was is that it went based on the tribes, and within the tribes, it went based on the fathers of the households. So each father of the household was apportioned a certain plot of land, and the woman, they would get when they would get married, they would then get their husband's plot. And the reason is because since it was a portion based on tribes, and tribalism goes based on the father. So if, let's say, a man from the tribe of Reuven marries a woman from the tribe of Shimon, so when they get married, then and they have children, they follow the tribe of the father. However, it's interesting when you speak about being Jewish, it follows the mother. So the essential elements of are you Jewish, are you not Jewish, follows the mother. But within Judaism itself, which tribe are you from, follows the father. So for example, Cohen or a Levi goes after the father.
Okay, in our roots, it started also from the father, like tribal. It's from certain era or something that it's changed to be from the mother, right?
No. Being Jewish was always from the mother. But within Judaism itself, which tribe you are from, that goes based on the father.
Also in the Tkupat HaRishonim.
Yes, always. Always. We learn it out from the Bible. There's a verse where we learn it out from. How do we know that we go after the mother? So what happened was there was a family that they had only daughters, 5 daughters, and the father passed away. So his portion he was supposed to receive in Israel, the daughters, that portion would seem to vanish because he had no sons. So they felt like they're going to lose the portion. So they came protesting to Moses and they said, hey, it's not fair. Why should we lose out and not get our portion in the land? Just because our father didn't have any sons. So in other words, so if there is a son, so the son basically inherits the father with that portion, and the woman, the girls, they join the family of their husbands but if there are no sons, then that portion that was supposed to go to the father all of a sudden disappears. There's no one to inherit it. So they felt it was unfair. So they went to Moses, and Moses didn't know what to do. He didn't know the answer. So he went to God to ask God. And God said, you know what? They are right. And from now on, we're going to enact a new law. And that is that if there are no sons, then the daughters will inherit the portion of land or whatever the inheritance of the father. So we see over here, and it was these 5 daughters, they were very brave and courageous to stand up to it's going like to the Supreme Court, the head of Moses himself. They didn't just talk to their neighbors, and they actually took action, and they went to Moses, and because of that, their names are mentioned in the Torah more than once, all of their names, as almost like a legacy for the fact that they were courageous to stand up. And Rashi, the commentary, explains what's the reason why they wanted the land. It wasn't because they were property moguls and they wanted to get some property. It's because they had a deep spiritual connection to the land of Israel, and they wanted to be a part of it. Which, if you think about it, that contrasts very much to the mistake of the spies, which was all men led, who the spies went to the land and they came back and they said, no, land is not good. And because of that, when they came back, all the men wept and they said, oh, we don't want to go to Israel, we want to go back to Egypt. Whereas the women, they held strong. It wasn't just the 5 daughters of Tzlafchad. All of the women, they had faith that if God took us out of Egypt, we will be going into the land of Israel. And just like he was able to do miracles for us then, he will help us, get into Israel. And therefore, the punishment that was given to all the men in that generation of the desert was that because they didn't want to go into Israel, then they were 40 years they would wander in the desert, and that whole generation were to eventually die in the desert, and only the next generation, their children, were to go into the land. That punishment, that decree was only for the men. The women, they were able to live on and go into the land because they had faith. So you think about the contrast between the men and the women. So you see that the woman had a very strong faith.
So these five daughters, did they marry? What happened when they married? What happened to this land?
It's a good question, but it could be they got both then. They had their portion and their husbands had their portion. Because each tribe, their husbands, let's say, were from a different tribe. So that portion stayed within the tribe, but their portion would basically now be transferred over from one tribe that they were born into, their father's tribe, into their husband's tribe. That's the reason why initially it wasn't meant to happen, because we didn't want any parts of the land to be transferred from one tribe to another. But in their case, because there were no sons, they received the land, and therefore it was transferred over to their tribe, their new tribe of their married husbands.
But then they need to be in two locations.
Whatever they were able to, I don't know what they did with it. The rest of the stories, we don't know what happened, but
I think one of them was not.
yeah, it could be. It doesn't really say in the Torah what happened to them, whether they got married or not. So let's start with text 1.2. Ben, would you like to read?
Rabbi Nassan says, Scripture comes to teach us that the strength of the woman in that generation was greater than that of the men. The men said in Bamidbar, chapter 14, verse 4, let us make a leader and just and the woman said, give us a holding in the land.
Rabbi Nathan is the rabbi that wrote all from Rabbi Nathan?
No.
Different one.
Yes, Rabbi Nathan is one of the sages from the Mishnah. Rabbi Nachman lived about 200-300 years ago. So very, very different times. Now, Mishnah Zalman, it's time to go. Okay. If you want to stay, it has to be quiet, okay? No speaking. Okay? You want to sit here? Yeah? Okay. If you sit here, it has to be quiet. So this special quality of women of that generation, the generation that left Egypt, is also reflected in the way God gave the Torah. So in the story of giving the Ten Commandments, God tells Moses to tell over the laws to the Jewish people. And the verse, so Yaron, would you like to read 1:3?
So when you say to the house of Yaakov, these are the women, and tell the children of Israel, these are the men. Why are the women mentioned first? Because they are quick to fulfill the mitzvah. Another explanation, in order that they should guide the children toward Torah.
So it's interesting that if the verse in Hebrew, it seems to be like a double expression. It says, so shall you say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel. Seems like it's repeating the same thing twice. So the Talmud explains, or the Medrash explains, that the first time, house of Jacob means to tell over the laws to the women. And then afterwards to the children of Israel, that refers to the men, which means that God said, teach the Torah first to the women and after to the men. So really, men are second class, women are first class. They were taught the Torah first. So why were women prioritized to be taught the Torah first? So it says because it's more important that they should learn the Torah. Why? Because number one, they have more of a passion, spiritual passion to connect to God and do the commandments of the Torah. Number two, women have the special role of guiding their children. And as you know, like the story, but that God told Moses who's going to be the guarantors for the Torah. And he said, there will be the elders, there will be Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. God said, no. Till he said the children. The children that ensures the continuity of the Jewish people. Who are the ones that are primarily influence the children? The mothers, the women. So therefore, God said, it's first teach the women and then teach the men. And then teach first the woman and then the men. And a third reason is given in another Medrash. It says, why teach the woman first? Because when their heads are screwed on straight and they're focused, then the men follow suit. Their husbands will follow after them. And there's a joke about that one time there was a man who was arguing with his wife. And finally he blurted out and he said, I'm the head of the household, so I make the decisions, and everyone else, you have to follow me because I'm the head. So the woman's like, yes, you're the head, but I'm the neck. Whichever way I turn, the head turns. So that is the reason why. So that is, we see the centrality, I think is the word, the central role that women play in the giving of the Torah. Now, we see this also, these special qualities of women in the famous poem, which we read every Friday night before Kiddush, called Eshet Chayil. Have any of you heard of Eshet Chayil? A woman of valor. It's the poem in Proverbs from King Solomon. Now check this out. Here's a book. We have a whole book called Woman of Valor, Eshet Chayil. Are you familiar with Eshet Chayil? It's a song, it's a poem from Proverbs, and we sing it as a song before Kiddush. There's different tunes, Eshet Chayil means, whatever, there's different tunes, but it's a custom to say before Kiddush. And it's basically all about praise of the Jewish woman. Now, this was said, it was composed initially by King Solomon, which he said it in praise of his mother, Bathsheba, who was the wife of King David. And some people say that it goes actually further back, all the way to Abraham, who said this as praise to his wife Sarah. So now this is actually a very, very beautiful book, where it goes verse by verse from, I think there's 22 verses or so in this poem, and each verse refers to another heroine, another Jewish woman throughout history. And then this book basically explains each verse, how it alludes to that woman from throughout Jewish history. Very beautiful book. You can pick it up on our shelf later and take a look. So now here's a beautiful quote from that poem. Deborah, would you like to read 1.5?
A woman of valor, who can find? Her worth is far beyond pearls. Her husband places confidence in her and lacks nothing good. Give her the fruit of her hands and let her deeds praise her in the gates.
So this is just one verse from it. It's very beautiful. I wanted to actually explain the last line. It says, give her the fruits of her hands and let her deeds praise her in the gates. So this is referring to all the good deeds that she does. Kind of, when you make an investment, let's say you invest £100. So you've got the principal, the £100, and then that £100, let's say it grows 8% or whatever. So then you get £108. So the principal, that is the £100. What grows is called the fruit. So same too, when we do good deeds in this world, we get reward. The reward also has two layers. There's the principal reward, like the £100, the main bulk of the reward, that's saved for the world to come, for heaven. But in addition to that, we also get the investment has dividends. It has what's the word?
Dividend, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Profit.
No, the word that's something is sort of recurring. Compounding, and thank you. The compounding interest that grows from your good deeds, that's the reward that we get to benefit here in this world. So the main reward, the bulk, the principal, that's saved for the world to come. So that's what it's saying. Give her fruits. The fruits is what's added on. That's like the dividends. So she gets to benefit from the fruits of her hand in this world, and her good deeds will praise her in the gates. That means the gates of heaven. When she goes up to heaven, she'll be getting also her main reward. So very beautiful. Now, there's many explanations, as we see, I have a whole book here on this. But the question is, who is the woman? So obviously this is poetry. So of course, woman refers to the woman, but we're going to now sort of go a bit deeper. We're going to explain that woman also applies to the feminine, and the feminine has many interpretations. So number one example is if you see 1.6, it says the woman of valor refers to the Torah. So if you think of it, God is the masculine and the Torah is his woman, so to say. Then in 1.7, Isabel, you want to read 1.7?
Rabbi Berekai said, in 10 places, the Holy One, blessed be he, called Israel a bride.
So really all the Jewish people are considered the bride of God. God is the groom and we are the bride. Now, so here we introduce some concepts from in Kabbalah. So although there's, generally speaking, there are the genders, you've got the men and women, masculine and feminine, but everything in this world, even God actually, has within God both masculine and feminine. So in fact, the process of how God created the world, he has different attributes. There's the masculine, and then there's the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is the divine presence. That is the feminine element of God, which is the part of God that divested from himself to create the world. Now, within every human being, we also have masculine and feminine traits. So even a man has feminine traits, and even women have masculine traits. Now, we see this in a very beautiful teaching of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the third Chabad Rebbe. Would you like to read number 1.8?
It is interesting to note the verse, "Sustain me with fires," which is also interpreted in connection with Ish and Isha, man and woman. This suggests that both qualities must be preserved together. Although a man is associated with strength and assertiveness, he is also meant to draw upon the qualities associated with women. As is known, women are more strongly associated with faith. Thus, the ideal is for a person to integrate both dimensions, intellect like a man together with faith like a woman.
So here, if you look at this is very fascinating. If you look at the screen, you see the two letters in Hebrew, Aleph and Shin, means Aish. Aish means in Hebrew, fire. Now, how do you say a man and a woman in Hebrew? So do you see that Ish and Isha contain the same letters of fire? The only difference is that in the man, there's extra yud, and in the Isha and the woman, there's extra hey. But other than that, they both have the same two letters of Aleph and Shin. The yud, but the man has the yud, and the woman has the hey. When you take a yud and a hey together, that combines, yud hey is the name of God. So that's what it says, that when man and woman are in harmony, then God's presence is between them. But when you don't, then a fire consumes them. So in other words, when you don't have God in between them, then the conflict between them can create a fire. But so the Tzemach Tzedek says something very fascinating. He says that the verse says, "Sustain me with fires," but it's fires. It says in plural sense, two fires, which means that every person has to have in them both fires, referring to the masculine and the feminine. So women should have also the masculine traits, and men should also have feminine traits to cultivate both of them. But what exactly is that? So we're going to now go specifically into 3 traits of the feminine to explain to highlight what they are, and then hopefully even the men here, including myself, can be able to learn how we can integrate them in our lives. So the first one is faith. So over here, we're going to take examples of Jewish women throughout history where we illustrate these qualities. So the first one we're going to talk about is Miriam, who was the sister of Moses, of Moshe, his oldest sister. So we see from here, Ben, do you want to read 2.1?
Rav Avira taught, "In the merits of the righteous women of that generation, the Jewish people were redeemed from Egypt." He describes their righteous deeds. They would bring food to their husbands in the field, bathe them, anoint them with oil, feed them, give them to drink, and bond with them.
So the Talmud says a very fascinating story. Pharaoh decreed that all the male babies should be thrown in the Nile because his stargazer saw that there would be a Jewish boy would be born who would be the savior. So he said, you know what, all the Jewish babies that are born, throw them in the Nile. So Miriam's father, his name was Amram. This is before Moses, he was the leader of the Jewish people at that time. And he heard that decree and he decided to divorce his wife because he said, I don't want to have children only for the babies to be thrown in the Nile. So he divorced his wife. And when he did that, all the people followed him and they divorced their wives. So at that point, he only had one daughter. Miriam was his eldest daughter. Miriam saw that his parents divorced, so she turned to her father and she said, "Your decree is even worse than the decree of Pharaoh, because Pharaoh's decree is only on the boys. Your decree, by separating from your wife and not having children and causing everyone else to not have children, you are causing both boys and girls to not be born. And also Pharaoh, by killing the boys, they only die in this world, but not in the world to come. But you are taking away both their life here in this world and in the world to come." And Amram, he heard what his daughter said, and he said, "You know what? You're right. He was humble enough to take her rebuke, and he remarried his wife. And guess what? Moses was born. Had he not listened to his daughter, Moses wouldn't have been born. And she prophesied, she was a prophetess even when she was a little girl. She knew that Moses would be born to them. And then when Moses was born, he was born a bit early, so he was at home for 3 months, and then they had to hide him in the Nile. And Miriam, she was the one who went out to look after him to make sure that he'll survive. She saw then how the daughter of the princess came and took him, as the story goes. Then years later, when the Jewish people, when it came time to leave Egypt, and it says that she led all the ladies with singing and dancing with tambourines, which is actually, if you look behind you on the shelf, you see some tambourines. This is actually the reason why there's like a custom for women to decorate tambourines and to have tambourines. It's because this is remembering Miriam, who had tambourines because of her faith. That she knew that when they left Egypt, that God would do miracles for them in the desert. So the question is, in the desert, where do you have musical instruments in the desert? Where do you get musical instruments? And the answer is that no, they were preparing because they knew that God will perform miracles. So they took out of Egypt these tambourines in order to be ready to celebrate for when the miracles would happen. So 2.4, Yaron.
The righteous women of that generation were confident that God would perform miracles for them. They had accordingly brought timbrels.
Tambourines, yeah. Timbrels is like tambourines, yeah. With them from Egypt. Now, this feminine faith that the woman had wasn't only when they left Egypt, it carried on as the story goes on. Sorry. Moses doesn't come down from the mountain because they miscalculated the days, and the Jewish people served the golden calf. So the story goes, 2.5, Deborah.
Want to give their jewelry for the calf, but within them the knowledge that I am God in the midst of the earth is stronger.
So the men came running to their wives to say, give me all your jewelry so we can take the gold and use it for the idol. The woman said no, not because they were like stingy and they wanted to keep their jewelry for themselves, because they said, I'm not going to give my jewelry for idol worships. So their faith was much stronger than the men. And as I mentioned before as well, that the pattern continued as well. When it came to the spies, it was the men who messed up and said, they lost their faith and said, oh, Israel is too scary. The men are too large. As we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, they said they were like grasshoppers in the eyes of the giants. And they said the people are too strong. However, had they sent the woman, like the daughters of Tzlafchad from this week's Parsha, who loved the land of Israel, which is why they wanted the portion, then if they would be sent as spies, and they would come back and, of course, only say good things about the land. Now, this is not only something in the past in history, but it's also in the current. So 2.7, Isabel?
General peoples are only redeemed in the merit of the righteous women of that generation.
So the Medrash says this is something which is it applies to all generations, not only in the past, but even in this generation, that we will be redeemed in the merit of the righteous woman of this generation. In the merit of the faith of the Jewish woman, we will be redeemed. Now, let's actually take a minute and speak about faith. What is faith?
Like belief.
In other words, how does faith work with like logic or knowledge? It's like you believe something because you can't understand it. Like, for example, when you go to a hospital to get a surgery, you have to have faith that the doctor knows what he's doing, because if you don't understand what he's doing, you have to have faith. So it's faith. Yeah. So there's a really good analogy is that faith is like seeing something. So you can describe, imagine there's like a piece of art. You can describe the art with many, many words and descriptions, but ultimately, when you see it, as the saying goes, right? A thousand, silent, sorry. It is on silent. No. So faith is like when you see something, it's like you see something, it's just so clear to you, the reality that this is true, that because as we spoke last week, our knowledge, our intellect is limited. Even the intellect of the smartest man in the world, the smartest scientist, is limited. It's limited to the knowledge in this world. But ultimately, the highest level of knowledge is to know that even that knowledge is limited and there's something beyond. And the highest, we spoke last week, the highest actualization or level of that a person can reach is for a person to surpass their knowledge and to know that there's more, and that there's something which is God, which is limitless, which is infinite. And that is really what faith is. It's to be able to see beyond the facade, not just to see what's in front of you and just sort of the hard, cold logic, but to be able to feel what's beneath the layers. That is the unique quality of faith. And that's the reason why we see something very interesting. Who was the first Jew? Abraham. Abraham was a big prophet, but what's even more interesting is that his wife Sarah was even a bigger prophetess than Abraham, which is why 2.8 is your turn, so we'll come back to you. So Ben, 2.8.
God said to Abraham, whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says. Rashi says this teaches us that Abraham was lesser than Sarah in matters of prophecy.
So God told Abraham, whatever your wife says, listen, Leah's parents, they have a joke because Leah's mother's name is Sarah. So his father says, whatever Sarah says, you got to listen to her. So, and that's because when it comes to maybe, being the first Jew or the pioneer, Abraham, he was the one who had the courage to go stand up against the armies and all the enemies and all the things that he did in his lifetime. But when it comes to actual prophecy, that spiritual intuition, or as we'll speak about in a minute, his wife Sarah actually had greater level than him. Okay, now speaking about faith, what's the Hebrew word for faith? Emunah. Now, emunah is the Hebrew word for faith. Now, faith, is it something which is like either you have it or you don't? Or is it something that you can cultivate? You can cultivate it. And therefore, it's something, even if you're, someone who's more skeptical, more scientifically oriented, you can cultivate faith. And that's why the word for faith, emunah, comes from the Hebrew word imun. What does imun mean? To practice, to train. A craftsman is called a uman. Craftsman is someone who practices his skill many, many times until he becomes a skilled craftsman. The word for that is uman. That is the same word as emunah. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, the primary book of Hasidic teachings, he explains this idea very beautifully. You want to read? 2.11.
Woman also connected to it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, very interesting, right? Uman, the city Uman. Okay, so 2.11.
The essential thing is the training, to habituate one's mind and thought continuously, so that it is always imprinted in his heart and mind that everything one sees, the heavens and earth, and all they contain, constitutes the outer garments of the King, the Holy One, blessed be He. In this way, he will constantly remember their inwardness and vitality, which is godliness. This is also implicit in the word emunah, faith, which is a purpose-making training, a discipline to which a person habituates himself like a craftsman who spends his time.
So through a lot of meditation, and the way he gives a very interesting thing, this is what you should always think about and meditate, is that look at the world as if everything you see in the world is like the garment. So just like a person wears a garment, you've got the body, and the body is then has the garments which cover the body, and the body can then express itself you can express yourself through your clothing, through the garments that you wear. You can choose your favorite style, your color, your this, your that. So think of the world as the garments of God. God is literally like wearing the physical world as his garments. So God is the essence behind it. When you look at a person, you don't just say, "Oh, nice to meet you, a black shirt." No, black. The black shirt is just your garment, but you are the one who's wearing it. So think about the world as like the black shirt. It's like the garment of God, but there's the God behind it. And the more you think about it, you train yourself like Uman, like a craftsman, then the more faith you will get. So that's something which you can actually cultivate and engage. So that is the first quality, feminine quality, which we learned from Miriam, is the quality of faith. Now we'll move on to the next, which is wisdom and intuition. So going back to the Eshet Chayil, the woman of valor, the poem. So we're going to go now to another verse from that poem in 3.1, Yaron.
Mouth is full of wisdom, her tongue with kindly teaching.
So we're saying here that one of the qualities of the woman is that her mouth is full of wisdom. She has very wise insight. So this comes to a very, very, we're going to introduce a little bit, again, idea from Kabbalah. If you see here, it's done a little bit of an interesting thing, but are you familiar with the 10 Sfirot? You can see here there's Chokhmah and Binah. So actually, Chabad? Chabad is an acronym for 3 levels of wisdom. Chabad stands for Chokhmah, Binah, and Dat, which literally translated, it doesn't make any sense, the English translation, but Chokhmah would be, what's the Chokhmah is, I don't even know how it's 3 types of knowledge. Knowledge, wisdom, and knowledge. But there's 3 different types of wisdom. So Chachma, the first one, Chachma, is the flash of insight. When you have an idea, we have a flash of inspiration, like, oh, that would be a great idea. And then when that flash of insight is called Chachma. Bina is then the developing of the idea, unpacking it and say, well, does it make sense? And let's see how that would work. So the Chachma is like the what, and the Bina is like the why and the how. So it's unfolding the ideas and explaining it and examining it. So
I think I saw it translated as intuition somewhere.
Bina,
Chachma.
Chachma.
Yeah. Could be wrong.
Okay.
I feel like I've heard it.
I've heard the analogy of like Chokhmah is like if someone tells you smoking is bad for you, and then Bina is like thinking about like what it actually would do to you, and then that is like the application of like stopping smoking.
Yeah, so today we're not gonna talk about Das. Das is application. So Das is basically when you have wisdom, but you apply the knowledge. But today we're talking about the 2 Chachma and Bina. Chachma is the masculine type of wisdom, and Bina is the feminine wisdom. So the Zohar gives an analogy of like Chachma being the burst of water that comes out from a well, and then Bina is the way it flows into a river. And the river goes has a length and a breadth and a depth. That's the Bina.
Smart, clever, intelligence. That's what he adds on to
Mhm.
wisdom.
If you think about it also, what is the role of a man and a woman in creating a child? The man provides the seed, and the woman is that takes the seed and develops it for 9 months with all till the baby grows until he's born. So that's the man provides almost like the potential energy, and the woman's job is to then use her insight to take it and develop it and nurture it through her womb, right, until she gives birth to the child. There is a funny joke. I don't know if you heard, in these, they say that a man's brain is like a waffle and a woman's brain is like spaghetti. Have you heard of that? So the way men's brain, this is like the comedians, they speak about the difference between men and women. Men's brains, they work like a waffle. A waffle means everything has its own box. Everything is compartmentalized. There's this, there's that. Whereas women, they're like spaghetti, where everything is connected. Everything is interconnected. And each one has its advantages and disadvantages. The man, the masculine energy can stay hyper focused and forget everything else and just do this one thing, till perfection. But for the woman, it's like, well, but what about that? But what about that? So the children have to be picked up, and how will this? What will that? Just thinking about the having the foresight to know what will be, this will cause in the future and the repercussions. Just being able to see how everything is connected. So one of the famous women that we're going to speak about in this topic of wisdom and intuition is the first one is Serach. Serach was the daughter of Usher. Usher from one of the 12 tribes of Jacob. So his daughter was Serach, who lived a very, very long life. There are a few stories about her. The first one is, the story of Joseph, that Jacob thought that he was dead, that his brothers sold him as a slave, and then his father thought that he was dead for many, many years until 22 years later, when the brothers came to Egypt because there was a famine, and he revealed who he was. And he said, okay, go. He said, okay, your job is now go back to Israel, tell my father that I'm still alive. Now, Jacob at that point was a very old man. So when they went back to tell Jacob, imagine after you think your son is dead for 22 years, and all of a sudden, and you're 120 something years old. Imagine what kind of shock you would get when you find out that your son that you thought is dead for 22 years is alive. That shock couldn't cause him to pass away just from the shock. So they went to Serach, she was a musician, she played the harp. And she came up with a brilliant idea of how to slowly break the news. She said, instead of just going and telling him, oh, Joseph is still alive, she said, she started playing it in a melody. If you're familiar with the song, Ani Yosef o David Chai, Ani Yosef o David. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? So she played the song. I don't know if it was that tune, probably not, but she played the song saying, and then Jacob started. He was listening to the song in the background, and slowly, with the calming, relaxing, melody, he was able to get the hint that his son is still alive. So that was just an idea of how she used her wisdom and intuition to manage a very delicate situation. I think that's a good way of putting it, is that women have a special wisdom how to deal with delicate situations. Sometimes men are a bit more blunt, a bit more, insensitive maybe, whereas the woman's sensitivity could see how to juggle and navigate delicate situations, as we see with Sarah. Another example is, so now Sarah, also when 210 years, the Jewish people were slaves in Egypt, and Jacob was so thankful to her that she did that to him and broke the news in a sensitive way. He gave her a blessing for long life. So she lived a very, very long life. And 210 years, when the Jewish people came to leave Egypt, Joseph's coffin was at the bottom of the Nile, and they had promised that they would take Joseph up to be buried in Israel, which he is buried till today, the tomb of Joseph in Shechem and Nablus. So they didn't know. Moses, who was born only later, he didn't know where Joseph was buried. But Sarah, she was still alive, and she knew exactly at which point in the Nile where his coffin was buried. So she helped Moses to bring up a coffin. Then years later, after the Jewish people already went into the land of Israel, she was still alive. And King David had a massive war. He had some opponents, who rebelled against King David. And King David's general made a siege on the city, and there was a man by the name of Sheva ben Bichri, who was the chief rebel, and King David's general wanted to kill him, and he sieged the whole city, and was going to have this massive civil war, which would be very bloody and deadly. So Sarah was there. She went to the general and she said, hold on, before you break out into the civil war, tell me what are you trying to do? So he said, well, there's this guy, I'm not here to kill innocent people, but we have to get this troublemaker. We have to get him. He rebelled against the king. We have to get him. So Sarah's like, leave it to me. Don't start war. I'll take care of it. So she goes to the people of the town and she says that, this is really serious. You've got this whole army outside the city. They're about to attack. All they need is 100 men. You have to surrender 100 men, and then they'll give in. So they say, okay, we'll give 100 men. So she's like, okay. She comes back a few minutes later. She's like, what? I spoke to them. They negotiated. They said 50 men is enough. You don't have to give 100 men. It's like, oh wow, 50 men. Okay, yeah, we'll give you 50 men. So she goes, she comes back a little while later. She's like, you know what? We don't even need 50 men. We only need one man. This guy who is the troublemaker, just give him, and then they'll leave you alone. So they took care of him, they killed him, did what they had to do, and then so she was able to stop an entire civil war, one single lady from breaking out, because just using her intuition, how to navigate again a very sensitive and delicate situation. There's another woman going sort of many years later into the times of the Talmud, who was actually a very famous woman. If you read the Talmud, again, it's mostly men, all the sages of the Talmud. The study hall was all men. But there was one actually very famous woman who was very extremely wise. Her name was Beruria, and she was the wife of Rabbi Meir, one of the sages. So there's a few different stories again about her. We don't have so much time, but I'll share one story. So it was actually quite a tragic story. They had two sons, and it was a Sabbath afternoon, and Rabbi Meir was in the study hall learning with the students, and something happened. I don't know what, it doesn't say what happened, but their two sons died, sort of suddenly. And Rabbi Meir comes home in the afternoon. It's getting close to the end of Shabbos, and she has to break the news to her husband that her two sons died. Well, she's obviously grieving herself as well. So Rabbi Meir comes in and he says, "Where are my sons?" So she's like, "Oh, they went out. They'll be back soon." She was just like pushing him off till Shabbos was finished. He made Havdalah to take out the Sabbath, and then she turns to her husband. She's like, "Let me ask you a question. If someone gave me a something to hold to watch for them this morning, and now they came to collect it. Do I need to give it back to them?" So Rabbi Meir says, "Yeah, of course you have to give it back to them." So he's like, "Okay." So then she comes and brings him into the room and shows him that the two sons had passed away. Rabbi Meir faints, and he wakes up. She says, "Well, didn't you tell me that if someone gave me something as a collateral to watch, to take care of, and then when they come and ask me to give it back to them, then that's what I have to do?" So that's exactly what happened. So Rabbi Meir, then he said the famous quote in Hebrew. He said, "Hashem natan, Hashem lakach." Hashem gave, and Hashem took back, which is a verse which we say by funerals till today. So that came from Rabbi Meir from then. So again, this is just another story about how, again, the bina is that not just the direct, blunt, sort of men. Sometimes they say, "I don't have patience. Give me the bottom line." Just whereas bina is the woman. They'll talk a lot to unpack and explain from all the different angles. That's the bina. So that is the depth and the intuition. That is the feminine knowledge. That special trait is the second trait that we see by women. Okay, so we see here like the chachma is the seed, and then the bina is what develops the seed to grow into a full tree and fruits, etc. So if you see in 3.3, the Holy One, blessed be, granted the woman a greater measure of insight than a man. So that is the bina. In Hebrew, it's called bina yetera, extra wisdom, because the men, they have chokhmah, and the women, they have more bina, which is actually very interesting. The word bina, which is again that's the Hebrew word for this type of intuition, and another actually Leah, I asked Leah to give me from her perspective. She told me a good analogy. She said, the men, they read the book, so they read the words that are in the book, the words on the lines. The woman, they see the words that are in between the lines. So it's like the actual knowledge, and then there's the depth that's behind it. So it's interesting. The Hebrew word for bina comes from the same word as boneh. What does boneh mean? Building, to build, which is very interesting because that is really, again, that's what the woman does. She takes what the man provides. The man provides the raw material, and the woman takes it and builds it and nurtures it and develops it into something beautiful. One more story on this topic, 3.5.
They also got to do with Bane, like in between, like a divider.
Interesting. Maybe. Deborah, you want to read 3.5?
Rabbi Guzli encountered Elijah the prophet and asked, "It is written, I will make him a helpmate."
This is speaking about, God is speaking about Adam, that he'll make him a helpmate, meaning Eve.
In what manner does a woman answered, "When a man brings wheat from the field, does he chew raw wheat? When he brings home flax, does he wear unprocessed flax?
So nicely.
It is his wife who transforms these raw materials into bread and clothing. Is she not then the one who lights up his eyes and stands at his feet?"
So, if you go back to traditional hunter-gatherer times, the man is the one who goes out to the field, fights, brings in, the animal, the food. But then the woman, she's the one who takes it and actually makes it into edible food. It's actually, the Medrash says that Abraham, all of his big accomplishments happened before Sarah passed away. So while Sarah was still alive, when he was fighting the kings and doing all of his big things. But once Sarah passed away, it says Abraham became old and eventually he died when he didn't have his wife by his side. Very unfortunately, it's something which we see. My grandparents both lived till in their 90s. My grandmother was much more healthy and fit than my grandfather, and we always thought she would live much longer than him. But unfortunately, she passed away first, and then within a year, he passed away.
So
It's interesting.
A lot of cases when one
One
of
year.
the spouses dies, and then the other one either gets cancer straight away or dies straight away, or it is. Yeah. The soul is 99% of the health.
Yeah.
99%.
So till now, we spoke about the unique qualities of women being faith and their wisdom and intuition. And now we're going to speak about a third one, which is woman being the foundation of the Jewish home. And in Hebrew, this is the word, it's akeret habayis.
again,
Akeret habayis means the pillar or the foundation of the home. Now, this doesn't, in Judaism, woman being the foundation of the home does not refer to cooking, cleaning, and house management. It means that spiritually, she is the one who is really creating the atmosphere in the home.
It's also related to the word boss with the balabais.
Ah, yes, yeah. So there's a quote, you have a house and you have a home. So without the woman, it's just a house, it's a physical house. But the woman takes the house and transforms it into a home, into something which is alive, which has, character and life and warmth and love. And also in a spiritual sense, she brings the meaning and the purpose into the home. So this is another verse from Proverbs 4.1. Isabel?
The wife will move still by them.
And the next one?
That a home is sustained and endures through the woman.
Yeah. So another joke on this topic. A man is bragging to his male friends, and he says, in my house, I make all the big decisions, and my wife makes all the small decisions. So they're like, oh yes, tell us more. Well, give us some examples. She's like, well, my wife, she decides where we're going to live, what college our children should go to, what car we should drive. So he's like, oh, well, that's the small decisions. Well, what do you decide? She's like, well, I decide, when a new leader it goes up in some foreign country, I decide if we're going to agree with them. I decide the UN votes if they're right or wrong. So all the solving global warming and the world's big issues. But she actually decides real life.
Like in our family, I said the last word.
And the last word is yes, dear.
Yes, dear.
Yeah. So here we're going to turn to one last. We're going to turn to one last heroine from Jewish history, which is Hannah. Hannah, a very beautiful name, which actually my mother's name is Hannah. This is a very, very beautiful story. We read it actually on the high holidays in Rosh Hashanah. We read in the Haftarah the beautiful, very moving story of Hannah. It's a very long story, but it's there was a man who had two wives, one of them, Penina, who gave birth to children. Hannah was barren, she didn't have children. She felt very bitter that she didn't have children. And she went into the temple, which was then in Shiloh, and she prayed from the depths of her heart. She was weeping and weeping to the extent that the high priest thought that she was drunk because of the way she was just crying and weeping. And she said, I'm not drunk, I'm pouring out my heart to God. And the Talmud actually takes the description of how she prayed. We learn out actually actual laws about prayer nowadays, how to do prayer from how Hannah prayed. For example, the reason why the Amidah is said silently, because it says that she prayed silently. So there's different things we learn out, very beautiful, until eventually she was blessed with a child who was Samuel, Prophet Samuel, who is the one who anointed King David as king. So she said a promise that if I'm going to have a baby, then I'm going to dedicate his whole entire life to be a servant to God, to be like a nazir, to be how do you know what a nazir is? Someone who's like sanctified, like
Priest, like
kind of, yeah. He doesn't cut his hair, doesn't drink wine, etc. So now, after he was born, she was fully devoted till he was weaned. For the first 2 years of his life, she was fully devoted to his education and upbringing. And there's a mitzvah that 3 times a year for the holidays to go up to the temple and pray. So when her husband went up to go to, it wasn't Jerusalem, this was before Jerusalem, it was Shiloh, to go. So he asked her, do you want to come with me up to the temple? And she said, no, I need to stay here with our baby, because if I travel, it would interfere with his upbringing. So we see from here the sort of her devotion, that she was willing to even forfeit her own spiritual, going to the temple and having. She was a prophetess. She wasn't, she wasn't just a simple woman, and she was willing to forfeit, going to the temple and having a spiritual experience, because she was devoted to her child, and to make sure that he has the best upbringing and education as possible. So we'll read one more text from 4.5. Is it your turn? Yeah. 4.5.
The woman, as the Akeres Habes, is primarily engaged in the affairs of the home. Her central concern is watching over the ways of her household. It should be openly visible that the home is directed by Akeres Habes, whose inner heart is a tabernacle and sanctuary for God, and whose conduct follows Torah guidance, expressed in the behavior of all members of the household, husband and children alike, whose action, speech, and thoughts become permeated with the mission of creating a dwelling place for him. Through the activity of Jewish women, each making her private home a tabernacle and sanctuary for God, light radiates from that home into the entire world. In this way, the ultimate intention of the giving of the Torah is fulfilled, to bring peace to the world and to make this entire world a dwelling place for God in the lower realms.
Thank you. So part of this role of a woman being the Akeres Habais, the foundation of the house, the pillar of the house, a woman is given 3 special commandments in the home that are special for the woman. Does anyone know what they are? 3 commandments, 3 things in the house, 3 commandments. So, yeah. Family purity. So it's actually an acronym for her name was Chana. Chana is Ches Nun Hey. Ches stands for Chala. Nun stands for Nida, which is family purity, and Hey stands for Hadlakat Haner, which is lighting the Shabbat candles. That's why actually making challah is something which is very common. Woman, it's a special mitzvah for the woman. Now, what is the common denominator between these 3 commandments, these 3 things? It's all basically 3 different areas of life where the woman's unique insights, going back to insight where we spoke before, is to take a mundane element of life and be able to see the spirituality in it. So, for example, take bread. You take food and you turn it into a holy bread, into challah. Or even the Shabbat candles. You take a day of the week, which was just a regular day of the week, and you turn it into a holy day. Or you take family purity, which is the most intimate part of our lives, and they turn it into something special and holy. So that is really the unique trait over here, is to be able to look at the world and see the spirituality that's in the mundane, not to look at the mundane as something that's separate from spirituality, but see how really everything is, this is going into the spaghetti, right? Everything is connected. They can see physicality, spirituality are not, men, they look at food, they see food. They go to the synagogue and they see Torah, they see spirituality. But women, they can see everything, how everything is all connected, how physical and spiritual are not really separate. Everything is really all one, which is the reason why, just to sort of conclude with one final point, that in Judaism, unlike in other religions, I want to actually talk about the synagogue and the commandments, is that what is the center of Judaism? Not the synagogue. It's the Jewish home. The synagogue is a place where we go to pray. That's one specific ritual that we do. But unlike other religions where you live your life, but then whatever. I'm not going to speak about other religions because I don't know enough, but in Judaism, the synagogue is only like one of the things we do. But where's the magic of Judaism? Where does it happen? In the home. The influence that you have on the children. Everything you do, from when we wake up, the food we eat, we make a blessing, we eat kosher food, everything that we do, the action is happening in the home, which is actually the reason why women are exempt from all the time-bound commandments. Because since a woman's role is so vital, she is the akeres habais, she's the foundation of the home. Her job is basically to hold up the spirituality in the house. She doesn't have time to get distracted with things that are time-bound. Imagining she's busy, tending to a child's needs. Like, oh, I need to go daven, I need to go put on tefillin. Like, no, a woman, her presence is the most important thing. So therefore, it would be counterproductive for them to have to be in their heads, to put an alarm on their phone for all the things that are, time bound specific. So the men, we take care of those elements, but the women, their role is to deal with being the foundation of the home and bringing the influence, the atmosphere and the spirituality into the home, into the family, both for herself and for her husband and children, etc.
Why would that come into your home?
So that's why, yeah, well, that's why we call it a Chabad house, because really it's just a house. It's a house, it's a Jewish house where every Jew can be part of the house.
Why can't women wear talit, or do women wear talit? In short, for example.
So it's not that they can't, they can. And in fact, it says that the daughters of Rashi was one of the most famous commentators. He only had daughters, and it says that his daughters wore tefillin. But that was more of a matter of exception rather than action. It's not forbidden, but it's not practiced. Yeah. So I think since for many, many generations it wasn't practiced, then, when some people came up with the idea of women starting to wear a talis, it was seen as something a bit provocative or something a bit out of the norm. And again, I think it also goes back to the same idea, is that in many places, like, women don't even go to synagogue in some communities because they're busy in their home with their kids. Definitely, if you do have the time to go to synagogue, and it helps you obviously to come and pray, it's definitely encouraged to come when you could, but there isn't that sort of obligation to do so. So the thing with the minyan is that it's a halachic thing, is that in order to count for a minyan, only people that are obligated can count. So since women are not obligated, they don't count. It's not because they're less than or second class. It's just that they're simply not obligated in doing it. So when they come, it's almost like voluntary. So it's voluntary.
I think there's something really nice about that though, because as a woman, you could think, I'm not obligated to do this, but I'm choosing to do it. So every time we daven, it's not like we have to do it. We're choosing to be close to Hashem by davening. So it's not it's the same with anything. Like if you have to give money, yeah, it's it's like volunteering versus community service or something. Like which one is more righteous, I guess, is not that. But I don't know.